So now we're going back to book one. The number one reason why I told you not to throw it away and make sure you keep it in your locker. We need this book. We're going to be working on this for the next week and a half as we go through it and we do the test for chapter 6. Now, these are things that I taught you in science, but I just introduced it into science. We didn't go really in depth like we're going to. This video is going to be a longer video because there's a lot of information that I want to make sure I repeat myself several times so you get it in your head. It's going to be important that you listen, you follow along, you're mentally engaged so that you know what I'm asking you to do on every single one of these setups. Now, there's going to be two different forms that we do. There's going to be the standard, or what this book calls customary, and your science book it calls standard units of measurement. But we're also going to be looking at the metric system. If you don't have your King Hector paper, I strongly advise that you make sure that you have it as well. This will be my one copy, and it'll be up on my board that you can look at, but I don't want it to leave my board because it's my one copy for everyone to use. King Hector doesn't usually drink chocolate milk, going right and going left. So we're going to be doing metric system, and we're going to be doing the customary or the standard units of measurement in each of the chapter lessons as we move forward. This one deals with lengths. You either have to memorize all of these conversions that are in this purple box, or you just turn the page back and look at it every time until you do know them. Now, some people know that there are 12 inches in a foot, and there are 3 feet in a yard, and that means 36 inches in a foot, and that there are 5,280 feet for every 1 mile that we have. But some people don't know all of those. Now, the other thing is on the metric system, it won't give you every conversion. So knowing this, knowing how to go up the steps and down the steps really will help, I promise. Let's look at what we're talking about. So in soccer, Kyle scored a goal. He was 33 feet from the goal. They want to know how many yards to begin with that he was from the goal. So what we're going to talk about is our setup, and our setup will be the same no matter what system we're using. You don't have to use the setup in the metric system, and there's a couple times it'll be more difficult because they don't give you the conversion rate that you need to know or your conversion factor. However, if I know the setup for every problem, I do know what I'm doing mathematically. What I'm talking about is being able to identify what I have and then what I'm going to. So it always starts out as a multiplication problem. That doesn't mean that it's going to be multiplication in my final step. It will depend on what I'm left with to show me what I'm going to do in my final step. So if I know what I have and I know what I'm going to every time, then I know how I'm going to do it. What I have will be put over 1. Now, I'm not going to count it wrong if you don't put it over 1, because sometimes that gets a little confusing and people forget to reduce what they're left with at the very end and drop that 1 off. Sometimes I'll have the 1 there, and sometimes I won't as I'm working them out. So just understand that it's over 1 compared to what the other one's over. The other one is always over what we call the conversion factor itself. And what that means is whatever this label is up above, this label has to be down below. That allows me to convert or change it into the measurement, the unit of measurement that is up on top. Now, that may have sounded really confusing. Hopefully it'll become a lot clearer as we work through these. So let's look at what we're talking about. I'm going from 33 feet to yards. So I'm going to write down first what I have and what I'm going to. I have 33 feet. I know I'm changing it into yards. I know it's a multiplication problem because it's always going to be set up first as a multiplication problem. But once again, that does not mean there's always going to be multiplication at the very end. When I look at it then, from yards to feet on my conversion table, it tells me that 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. So I have yards up above because that's what I'm going to. So I have to have my 1, and then I know my 3 feet goes down below because that's my conversion factor or my conversion rate. Conversion just simply means I'm going to be able to cross-reduce and reduce the label and get rid of it, which leaves me with the 1 label that's up above. Now I can cross-reduce both of those numbers. I don't have to, which you'll see in the book, but I can. And 3 would go into both of them. 3 goes into 3 ones, and 3 goes into 33 11 times. What I'm left with then is my feet and feet. I'm going to convert those. I'm going to get rid of them from the top and the bottom, which leaves me with my conversion rate that I need at the end. I'm left with yards. And then I'm just left with 11 times 1 yard, which gives me 11 yards. And what they showed you here in the book then is instead of cross-reducing the numbers, we just multiplied. It's the same idea. What I have versus what I'm going to. I'm going to yards, so I know my conversion factor is 1 yard over 3 feet. And then I just reduce the feet. That's all they show you to reduce and multiply across. Well, I'd end up with 33 over 3. 33 over 3 is a division problem, right? Because all fractions are division. And when I divide that, it would just give me 11. So I get the same answer no matter what. I know that 33 feet, he was actually 11 yards if I want to know how far he was in yards. With the same idea, but we're going to change it into the next measurement. The next measurement we look at is going to change it into inches. Well, if he was 33 feet, he was 11 yards. How many inches was that? So I'm going to start with what I have, 33 feet. What I'm going to, 12 inches. How do I know I'm using 12 inches? Well, I'm going to use 12 inches because when I look at my conversion chart, I know I'm starting with feet, and that has to be down below. And I'm changing it into inches. So where have they paired up? Inches and feet. Well, they tell me that 1 foot is 12 inches. So I have to put the 12 with the inches, which is what I'm going to change it into. And then at the bottom, I have to put my 1 foot because that's the conversion factor. That allows me, having foot at the bottom, to reduce or get rid of or convert my labels. There's a foot at the top, a foot at the bottom. They cross-reduce, it's no longer there. I'm left with 33 times 12. Well, before we divide it, well, this is where my final step will just be indicated with what I'm left with. I'm left with 2 numbers at the top in a multiplication problem, so I'm just going to multiply across. 33 times 12 gives me 396. So how far was he from the goal in inches? Well, if he was 33 feet, which is the same as 11 yards, that is the same as saying he was 396 inches from the goal. Knowing what I have, knowing what I'm going to, is how I'm going to solve the question every single time. Then going back and looking at this chart and figuring out what my conversion factor is. Or I may have the metric system. They give you the metric system conversions in blue. Not all of them that we need are going to be on that chart. So understanding the steps of King Hector will make it easier to know what you're doing. Either way, it's done the same. I have 73.9 meters. I need to change it into centimeters. Now, when I look at King Hector, I can tell what direction I want to move my decimal and how many times. Because I start at meters, and once again, meters is usually the unit on my chart. It's in the center. So meter, gram, and liter are all my base units, always in the center. It takes me to centimeters, which is 2 steps to the right. So I would just move my decimal to the right 2 times. But if I set it up with this idea, what I have versus what I'm going to, I'll see it's the same thing. So what do I have? I have 73 meters. I'm going to centimeters. So I have my conversion here in this box. It tells me for every 100 centimeters, which has to be at the top because that's what I'm going to, there's 1 meter, which has to be at the bottom, so I can cross-reduce my labels. So they give me my setup of 73.9 meters for every 1 times my centimeters over my meters. If they ask for what the rate is that you're using, the conversion factor, then I would just list it as my 100 centimeters over 1. What I'm going to, once again, has to be on the top of that second fraction. When I know what that means then, is if I multiply to the right, like we talked about 2 steps, then I would just multiply and move my decimal 2 times. If I was going to the left, just a reminder and refresh what we talked about when it comes to King Hector in science. If I'm going to the left, it's the first time I've ever met the king. So the closer I get to him, the smaller I feel like a person, the more intimidated I am. So that tells me I'm dividing and moving my decimal to the left and making it a smaller number. But when I do it mathematically and I do my 100 over 1, then I know that I'm just left with getting rid of my meters and multiplying across. So going from meters to centimeters, I move 2 times. 73.9 times 100 in my calculator is the same as showing the King Hector steps. If I take 73.9 times 100, then I look at how many zeros there are. I look at that I'm multiplying, which always tells me to move right. If I multiply, I get more. I get a bigger number. So if I move my decimal 2 times to the right, because there are 2 zeros, I'm going to get the same answer as if I type this into my calculator. I'm going to get 7,390 centimeters. Both ways get me to the right answer. So which way do I want you to do, this one or this one? Once again, it's up to you. Which one are you most comfortable with? I'm going to tell you doing it this way is going to be easier on some of them, because on some of them, they don't give us our conversion factor that we need to use. We'll see that in just a moment. My final answer then should be 7,390 centimeters, and we're ready to move on. This one then says, same number, but instead of going down to a smaller measurement, I'm going to go up to a bigger one. So once again, if I either look at my chart and figure out what my meters to kilometers conversion factor is, which it tells me down at the bottom, for every 1 kilometer I have 1,000 meters. Or I can remember that going from meters up to the king, moving left, I feel smaller, 3 steps, so I have to move it 3 times. Then I know how to set up my problem. I have my conversions, and I know that I have 73.9 meters that I'm starting with. I'm changing it into kilometers or kilometers. That goes at the top. How many kilometers to meters? 1,000. So that has to go at the bottom so I can reduce or convert my labels. When I convert my labels, I get rid of my meters. I'm left with 73.9 divided by 1,000. If, instead of multiplying to the right, because I'm going down the steps, I move to the left, like we just saw, going up to the king, then I could do it just as a setup of 73.9 divided by, because I'm going up to the king, 1,000. Why 1,000? Because we went up 3 steps for my base unit, 1, 2, 3 to the king. So I'm dividing by 1,000. Either one, type it into my calculator and dividing by 1,000, or setting it up this way and then showing how many zeros there are and what direction I'm moving my decimal in is going to get me to the right answer. So you either need to show all of this to get your credit, or you're going to show all of this that I'm going to do to get all of your credit. I know I have 3 zeros, so I'm going to move it 3 times. In what direction? To the left, because dividing makes it smaller. I move it once, twice. There's no other number there, but I still have to move it 3 times because there were 3 zeros. So I add my 0 to the front. So I get 0.0739, 739 10,000ths. If I type this into my handy dandy calculator, 73.9 divided by 1,000, I still get 739 10,000ths. So how many kilometers is it? If this is the number of meters that I have, 0.0739 kilometers. Either way that you want to do those is fine with me, as long as you show me the steps and you get to the right answer. So let's do our share and show. Now, once again, I want to repeat myself several times so we get this process in our head. So it's going to be a longer video. Please pay attention. Please be engaged. Please follow along and show all of the steps. So on this one, I'm going to go from miles to yards. And it just first asks, well, what is the conversion factor? Well, miles to yards. Let's see. When I look, now I know you're not going to be able to read it, but you can look in your book and turn the page back and find it, because it's really small for me to see. But I can see down here at the bottom, 1 mile is the same as 1,760 yards. So that's my conversion. Which one goes on top? Well, I'm changing to yards, so the 1,760 goes on top for every 1 mile. All right, so now what we have here? Well, we have the setup. What I have 3 miles. What I'm going to, well, I have to have the yards at the top, 1,760 yards over 1 mile. Allows me to reduce my miles labels, and therefore I'm just left with my final step as multiplication. So 3 times 1,760 gives me 5,280 yards. 5,280 yards is the same as 3 miles. Well, how about from decimeter to hectometer? Now, on number 2, how do I know I'm talking about decimeter and hectometer? By the abbreviation. If it's just a DM, that's a decimeter. And I believe that's all we use on this lesson, is just the lowercase d, and we don't do a decameter. So decimeter is the DM. I'm going to hectometer. So if you look in the blue box in your book, what is the conversion to go from decimeter to hectometer? It might take you a while to look and find it because it's not there. This is where if I understand how the steps for the king works, it's also here on your book, then it'll be easier to figure out what my conversion rate is. So if I go where my decimeter is, so King Hector doesn't usually drink. The drink is my decimeter. It's one step down from meter. And I'm going to hectometer, and this is my base unit, my decameter. Here's my hectometer. Well, how many steps do I go? Well, I'm going to go 3 steps, right? So for every 1 hectometer that I have, it takes 3 steps or 1,000 decimeters. That's how I know what my conversion rate is. If not, I'd have to figure it out using all of that information and do some extra math, which I don't want you to have to do. Look at your steps and know what they are. So when I have those, then I can cross-reduce my decimeters. I'm left with 43 times 1 hectometer, so 43 hectometers, divided by or over 1,000. If I have that as a division problem, I could just type it in and divide. Or if we just know I'm going to the left, and that means I'm dividing, then I could write my 43 divided by 1,000, because there were 3 steps that we went to hectometer, and that would tell me how to divide it. So if I have 3 zeros, I move 3 times, well, where's the decimal? Well, this is where a couple people messed up in the science part of it when I taught this the first time. They just put the decimal in the front and started moving. If it's a whole number, the decimal is always to the right. It's always to the end of the original number. Then I can move it. If the decimal's already there, it starts at that point and then moves in either direction. There isn't one here, so I have to put it at the end of the 43. When I have it at the end of the 43, I look at how many times I'm going to move it, and I'm always told how many times I'm going to move it by how many zeros I have in my multiplication or division problem. I have 3 zeros. It shows division, so I'm going to move it to the left. I knew that because going from here to here, I moved to the left. So I know I have to move to the left. 3 times, once again, just like before, there's not a 0 there, but I do have to move it to 3 times. So I will add a 0. Either way, dividing with my calculator 43 by 1,000 or moving it to 3 times for my decimal point is going to give me the same answer, 43 thousandths, 0.043. If I have 43 decimeters, how many hectometers do I have? I have 43 thousandths of a hectometer. All right, so this one, yards to inches. If I have 9 yards, which is what I'm starting with, and I'm going to inches, what factor, conversion factor, would I use? Well, my conversion factor has to give me inches at the top, because that's what I'm going to, and yards at the bottom. Do I have a conversion on my purple chart that shows me the difference between yards and inches? Well, I do. My second one says 1 yard is the same as 36 inches. So I know I need to have 36 inches at the top, and I need to have 1 yard at the bottom. That allows me to do my math. I'm going to convert by dropping off my yards, because there's one at the top and one at the bottom. I get rid of those. And then I'm left with just multiplication. I multiply across anytime I have fractions. 9 times 36 inches gives me 9 times 36, which is 324. So 9 yards is the same as 324 inches. Next one. 72 feet changing into how many yards? So I know what I'm starting with. I'm starting with feet. What am I going to? I'm going to yards. So I have to have a conversion factor where yards is on top. And then since I'm starting with feet, the feet have to be on bottom. When I look at my conversion chart, I can see that every 1 yard is the same thing as 3 feet. It's the third one down. If I know 1 yard is the same as 3 feet, then all I have to do is then the math that's left. I reduce my feet. Now, I could cross-reduce my 3 because 7 plus 2 is 9 if we look at our divisibility rules. And 3 does go into 9 evenly. Or I could just multiply across and see that I have 72 over 3, and that also tells me to divide by 3. Either way, I get to the same answer. 72 divided by 3 is 24. So 72 feet is the same as having 24 yards. Now, number 5. I'm going from millimeters to decimeters. And once again, my conversion factors up here don't show me how to go from one to another. So if I know how my king hecto steps work, I could figure out that conversion factor without having to have it written on my chart. Going from millimeters, which is down at the bottom, to decimeters. Well, this is centi, and the next one is deci. So I have 2 steps. So I know I'm going to be using 100 because there are 2 zeros on 100. So when I start with what I have, which is 7,500 millimeters, and I go to what I'm going to change it into, which is 1 decimeter, then I know I'm going up 2 steps. The 2 steps tell me that I'm going to divide by 100. I cross-reduce my labels, so I convert it to where all I'm left is my decimeter as my label. And I have 7,500 decimeters divided by 100. Or if I simply take my 7,500 and I move it 2 times to the left, because I'm going up my steps, 2 steps, then I would just move it 2 times with my decimal from the end over to the left, which is both, either way, either by moving the decimal or dividing this out, I'm going to get that it is 75 decimeters. So 7,500 millimeters is the same as having 75 decimeters. All right, so these 4 take us back to story problems. This one's different, and this one's going to try to trick you. So please pay attention, especially when we get down there. Rohan used 9 yards of ribbon to wrap gifts. How many inches of ribbon did he use? So all of these extra words are just to try to confuse you. Don't let it confuse you. Look for what you have and look for what you're going to. I have 9 yards. What am I going to? Well, it says how many inches. So I'm changing it to inches. And when I know yards has to be at the bottom, if I have 9 yards, how many inches are in a yard? There are 36 inches for every 1 yard. Should make sense, even though it is on the chart. But one yard is 3 feet. So for every 3, I have 12 inches. 3 times 12 is 36. I'm going to be able to cross-reduce my labels. Now, this one has an S and that one doesn't have an S. That doesn't matter. It still lets me convert and drop them out. I'm left with 9 times 36. 9 times 36, I put 9 times 12, should be 9 times 36, is equal to 324. 324 inches would be how many inches 9 yards is. So about number 7. One species of frog can grow to a maximum length of 12.4 millimeters. What is the maximum frog species in centimeters? So going from the very bottom over 1 step. So I know I'm going to have a 10 in there. And I went up from millimeters to centimeters, so I know that I'm going to be dividing. Start with what I have, 12.4 millimeters. I'm going to change it into centimeters is at the top. So for every 1 centimeter, I had 10 millimeters because there was 1 step. If I just divide by the 10, moving my decimal to the left 1 time, then I know that I'm going to just shift it and get, either way, 1.24 centimeters. It's a very tiny frog. So 1.24 centimeters, either by dividing with my calculator or shifting it 1 time because of the 1 0 that I'm moving it with. All right, so number 8. The height of the Empire State Building measured to the top of the lightning rod is approximately 443.1 meters. What is the height in hectometers? So my meters is my base measurement. I have to go up to deca and then go up to Hector, which is his name. So that's 2 steps, and I'm going to the left. So if I know that I'm starting with 443.1 or 443 1/10 of a meter, and I'm going to change it into hectometers, then I have to know that I have 2 steps going up to hecto. So for every 1 hectometer, I have 100. The 2 steps gives me my 2 zeros for my 100. Now I can reduce my labels, and then I would have 443.1 divided by 100. Or I could do my shifting to the left. I go from meters up to hecto, that's 2 steps to the left, so I move my decimal to the left. When I move it to the left 2 times because of my 2 zeros, then I'm left with both answers, either with my calculator or by showing my shifting of my decimals, 4.431. 4.431 hectometers. I have to remember my label anytime I'm doing these problems. Now, as I said, number 9 is going to try to confuse you. We're not going to let it confuse us. We're going to write exactly what it says. A snail moves at a speed of 20 or 2.5 feet per minute. Now, when we talked about labels, we talked about unit rates, which we'll review here in a couple of weeks. Unit rates tells me a number over 1. When it says per minute, we know that that's 1 minute. So what they just gave me, what I'm starting with, is my 2.5 feet over 1 minute. And then I want to know that how far I moved in half of an hour. Okay, so half of an hour. If I have 2.5, let's see, that should be feet per minute. I apologize. Per minute, and I'm going to change it into how many yards I go. Well, if I have 30 minutes and I have 1 yard, I'm going to do this completely wrong on this problem because I didn't convert it into feet. I apologize. All right, so I had to change it here. So this should be been my feet. That would allow me to create, if I had my 2.5 feet instead of the label yard, I apologize, per 1 minute, and I know I'm going for 30 minutes, then I would be able to cross-reduce my minutes. If I have 2.5 times 30, I'm left with 75 yards. But then I have to know that I'm changing it into feet. How do I change it into feet? Or how do I change it into yards? Man, I'm getting this all backwards. I apologize. If I have 75 feet, I just changed it back down here. And I'm going to change it into yards. That's when I have to do my conversion that we've been talking about. So my first step that I had to do is I had to figure out how far I had gone in 30 minutes. If I went 2.5, imagine that's feet for every 1 minute, and I went for 30 minutes, then I'm just left with 2.5 times 30, which gives me my 75. When I have my 75 then, now I have to change my feet, because that's what I should have actually had written down, by having my conversion factor at the bottom of feet. So I have 1 yard divided by 3 feet, allows me to cross-reduce my feet, and then I have 75 over 3. So I would just simply divide by my 3. 75 divided by 3 tells me that I actually went 25 yards. Sorry to have gotten that one wrong with my labels, made it confusing, and I apologize. All right, so here's where I want you to work. Now, I haven't done any of these. We've already done greater than, less than, and equal to. We've talked about how to convert these, and I'm going to tell you there's 2 ways to do every one of these. What I want you to do is I want you to start with number 10 first. Pause the video, work through it, then unpause it, and then we'll talk about the 2 different ways you could have solved for it. But you've got to see is 32 feet greater than, less than, or equal to 11 yards. So pause the video now, unpause it, and check your answer. Hopefully you've done what I've asked and you have an answer here. So both ways that we can do it, I'm going to work for you. We can either change it from feet into yards, or we can change it from yards into feet and do a comparison. So I had 32 feet, which is what I started with. I'm changing it into yards. It has to be on top. My conversion is 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. So that leaves me with 32 divided by 3. When I divide 32 divided by 3, I'm just going to make it a mixed number. 10 2/3 is what I had left. 10 2/3 yards compared to 11 yards. So I know that's smaller. If I wanted to, I could have changed my yards into feet. It just really depends on which one you are the most comfortable with in doing. I don't care which way you do it as long as one of them is shown and you get the right answer. So if I change my yards into feet then, I would have my 11 yards, what I'm starting with. What I'm going to 3 feet. Why 3 feet? Because I know my top label has to be feet, and I have to have a bottom label of yards. And there are 3 feet for every 1 yard. That allows me to cross-reduce my yards. I'm left with 11 times 3. 11 times 3 is just 33. So I have my 33 over here. So either one, I can either look at, this is 11 yards and this is 10 2/3 yards. My arrow points to the smallest number. Or I can look at that, this is 32 feet and this is 33 feet. My arrow still points to the smallest number. Either way, my arrow should point to the left. The tip of the arrow points to the smallest number every time. All right, so now I want to do 11 and 12, now that we've seen how to do those. And then I come back and check both of your answers and see how you did. Remember, there's more than one way you can do both of them, and I will show you both ways, just to make sure that I cover how anyone would have done it. Pause the video now, do both, and then come back to me. All right, so now looking at 11, you should have written down one of two problems. You either changed your 537 centimeters into meters, or you went backwards. So when I change my 537 centimeters into meters, I start with knowing what I have, 537. What I'm going to meters, and for every 1 meter, there are 100 centimeters. Or you just shifted your decimal 2 times, because you know going from centimeters to meters would go up the steps 2 steps, so I could shift my decimal 2 times. Either way, this would be the same as 5.37 meters. Now we could put an equal sign now, but we're going to check the second way, just in case anyone did it the second way. So in the second one, what I'm starting with is 5.37 meters. So that would have to be first. And then what I'm going to is centimeters on the second one. If I multiply by 100, or I move my decimal 2 times to the right, then I would have 537. Why would I move it 2 times to the right this time? Well, in this time, I started at meters and I went down to centimeters. So going down to deci and then down to centi is going to the right 2 times. That's why we multiply it by 100 or move it 2 times. That says, well, that's the same as 537. Those match. 537 is the same as 537, or 5.37 is the same as 5.37. So I know those are equal values. The final one then, you could have either changed your inches into feet or changed your feet into inches. And once again, I'll work both of them for you. So 75 inches changed into feet. What I have, what I'm starting with, is my 75 inches. What am I changing it to? I'm changing it into feet. It has to go on top. And my conversion factor is that for every 1 foot, I have 12 inches. That allows me to reduce my labels, and I'm left with 75 over 12. 75 divided by 12 gives me 6, and then I had some left over. Now when I reduced it, because I would have had 3/12, when I reduce it, I get 6 1/4. So I put 6 1/4 is the same as 75 inches. If I want to change my feet into inches, then I would take my 6 feet, because that's what I'm starting with, changing it into inches, so inches has to go on top. My conversion is that for every 12 inches, there's 1 foot. So I cross-reduce my feet, and I'm left with just 6 times 12. 6 times 12 is 72. So I put my 72. So when I look at this, then I have 75 inches compared to 72 inches, or I have 6 feet compared to a little more than 6 feet. So my arrow has to point to the right on this one, because it always points to the smallest number. So hopefully you understood those. Those shouldn't be difficult. It was just deciding which way you have to do it. Please understand, I do not expect you to work both ways. You either work this way or you work this way, but I have to see one of the problems that you did in order to get the answer. If you just have a symbol, you miss a point. And getting 1 out of 1, you get a 50%. That's not an acceptable grade. All right, so your assignment is going to be 319, once again, 1. Questions 2 through 14. There's a lot more here to do than we have been doing, but there's only, one math problem to do for each one, where in chapter 13, we had 3, 4, 5 different math problems we had to do for each of those questions. And then on the back, 1 through 6, so the top 2 is going to be conversions, and then the bottom 4 are going to be anything that we had taught in the first 5 chapters as review. If you have any questions as you're working through this, then please come and ask. I'm really hoping you followed along and filled out your book. I knew it was going to be a longer video, but it's important that you hear me saying it over and over and over again so we get it in our heads. Engaging our brains, active listening, and following along in our book is going to help us be successful for the next chapter and a half.